International Women's Day. Welcome to Randstad and WXN's live discussion on the challenges facing Canadian women in today's workplace and the opportunities that exist for positive change. I'm Kiersten Byrick, the Chief Operating Officer of WXN. At WXN, our mission is to inspire belief in women from within themselves and their communities. That leadership is well within the realm of possibility. And then to help make it possible. All of our energy goes toward the education, support, and recognition of women leaders and future leaders. We do this through our international speaker series across Canada, the UK, and Dublin, our mentorship programs in Canada and Ireland, our Ireland's Most Powerful Women Top 25 Awards, and Canada's Most Powerful Women Top 100 Awards. And we do it because we think it can change the world. The nominations for these Canadian awards have officially opened today. In addition, WXN is also celebrating International Women's Day by offering free membership to women and men to join our community. And for those existing members, a special buy one, get one offer for March, April, or May Speaker Series events from now until March 31st. Check out wxnetwork.com for more information. With me today is Faith Tull, Senior Vice President of Human Resources at Randstad Canada, and a seasoned HR professional with over 25 years of experience in the industry. At Randstad Canada, she's responsible for leading and directing the human resources team and contributing to the achievement of the organization's short and long-term business objectives through the development of leading-edge programs and services. Faith reviews and establishes HR business priorities on an ongoing basis to ensure results have a positive impact on internal and external clients, and continues to position Randstad as an employer of choice. Welcome, Faith.
Thank you.
Our second panelist is Shoana Prasad, Executive Coach and founder of Glenwood Consulting Group, Inc. Her career began with preparing speakers for the Toronto International Film Festival, as well as other festivals and film markets in both Canada and the US. Beyond her 5 years of coaching international studio executives, she spent the next 10 years in private practice, where she led senior executives of Fortune 500 companies to the podium time and time again. Her clients include financial institutions, consumer products, pharmaceutical and healthcare, as well as media and technology companies. Outside of the corporate space, Shoana is a speaker at Schulich School of Business at York University in Toronto and the McGill Business School in Montreal, and has prepared speakers for Toronto's first ever Women's TEDx. Remember to send your questions to us through Periscope or Twitter with the hashtag WomenInBiz, and we'll answer them at the end of the discussion. Let's get started.
Amazing.
Okay, so we have some questions, but obviously want to get some feedback from Periscope and Twitter, and want to make sure that we have a wonderful discussion between the two of us. So Faith, I'm going to start with you. Where and or how did you develop your leadership skills?
I'll start personally. So I developed it from my mom, single mother, 4 girls. I'm the youngest of the 4. And I just saw the way she worked really hard. She had grit, she had stamina, she continued to improve herself, held 2 jobs sometimes, as well as going back to school to be different from her peers at work, her colleagues at work, but just to get that next best job that she could. So I admired that from a young age. So I modeled a lot of that in my life. And then later on in life, I saw great leaders, and I tried to mirror what they did. They had great communication skills. They were transparent. They were people friendly. They actually cared about their employees. It wasn't just a number. And just being able to share a vision. So those are some of the things that I saw worked really well. Employees responded well to it. I did. So looking at that personally from a young age, and then later on in life were examples for me.
That's great.
Yeah.
And Shoana, what about you?
Mm-hmm. Just want to pick up on something that Faith said, because I love the idea of it starting at home. So one of the things I often say to my clients is who you are around the boardroom table has everything to do with who you were around the kitchen table, and the messages that you heard and what you saw and who made dinner and who served it and who cleaned it up. And I think, when we're talking about something like International Women's Day, and all these corporations all over the world globally are trying to say, what more can we do to get toward gender parity? It's important to do it when we're adults, but it's even more important to do it before we send our kids off to school even.
Right.
So I think that's really important. Yep. So my leadership abilities, I would say that every day. I mean, every time I open my mouth, I feel like I'm always trying to fine-tune and find that sweet spot. In my work, I'm always client-facing, so I'm doing my best to lead by example, but I'm also working with leaders at all levels, and so I'm learning from them as well. So whether it's one-on-one conversations, boardroom scenarios, or when I'm at the podium, I kind of feel like the leadership skill and ability is always shaping itself, and it's always evolving, and that's what I think is so exciting about it. Yeah.
That's great. So going to your industries, you're obviously in pretty different industries, but how do you see women shaping the future of your industries?
So in my industry, it's as an organization, we're about 20 years in Canada, but we've gone way back into the 60s within the scope of the industry, and traditionally it's very female dominated, and it still is. I'd hazard a guess to say it's about 60% female versus male, and what we've seen is because of that we have females in significant leadership roles, which is just so inspiring to young cohorts coming up who are female, who want to get that top job. So we try to model that on a regular basis. We have females, wearing the brand of the organization, setting the strategic priorities, participating in events like this, just to spread the word. So I've seen a huge growth in our industry from a female leadership, not just the fact that we're females, but the fact that we're setting strategic priorities and we're at the table and we have a voice at the table and we're able to share our experiences, with the rest of the industry. Yeah.
Fantastic. What about yourself?
Well, you're right. I mean, our industries are quite different, although I think we do our best to support each other. My industry is quite small and I would say relatively niche. So the people who I watch and who I really have my eye on, people like Amy Cuddy, Brene Brown, people who, these women are scientists and they're trying to find and understand and help us take on their quantitative research and make it something real and make it something that we can use in very tangible ways. And I think even to the point where in the world of academia, they're almost being I wouldn't say ostracized, but they're being questioned because they're making their science so available to not only corporations, but other independents. So that would be an example of two people who I'm really watching, people who are trying to combine the science with story. And that's what I find very, very interesting and very exciting.
Yeah, that's great.
I love that you mentioned the science, because that is something that we need to encourage more.
Yes.
There's a lot of research out there about the lack of women in science, technology, engineering, and math.
Yeah.
So it is paramount that we look to these leaders to ensure that, again, there's an avenue. There is not just the siloed approach to what a female can do versus what a male can do.
Right.
It should be gender neutral, but we definitely have to encourage that.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
right. And I think part of the beauty of a day like today is it's a if only once a year, it's a reminder that we have more options other than teacher, nurse, none. Right? Which 30, 40 years ago, that was the buffet of options. So the fact that we're doing what we're doing and that we are represented more and more in corporate offices and more in politics and more in academia, and we're still trying to push our young women to go into those STEM industries as well. So yes, we've got somewhere to go, but we've come a long way, and clearly I am the glasses half full kind of gal. So that's why I think, it goes back to the mantra of when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So if we can see where we're similar and less on where we're divided, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I come from an engineering background,
Awesome.
and I was chatting with one of my former colleagues this morning at another International Women's Day event, and we were talking about how, the mix of women in STEM programs going into engineering, math, business schools, it's growing. So we're getting more younger girls into these programs, but what we're seeing is that on the engineering side, not as many people are actually getting their PEng. Not as many women are staying in the profession long enough in order to really use it. And so now the question is becoming, what are the barriers that are possibly in the workforce that are preventing women from staying in those careers?
Yeah.
Right. And was there any conclusion or any sort of brainstorming that happened out of that conversation?
That's what people are trying to figure out.
Right.
Yeah. There's probably a couple of reasons, and we've done some research that highlighted some of them. So some of the barriers are self-inflicted. I've got to admit, a lot of us will not ask for the top jobs. A lot of us will lack the confidence to just go for it the way a male counterpart would. And also, if they're not seeing the role models, they're not going to go forward to think that they're able to be the professional engineers and to continue with their studies, because they're not seeing that exemplified within the different sectors. I know that in manufacturing and oil and gas, for instance, it's very male dominant.
Right.
So at the end of the day, if you're not seeing a reflection of you in those organizations, you're not going to go for it. The bigger thing is it's the perception of the female roles, where the fact that we're nurturing mothers and caregivers, that could be a perception of the barrier. Well, they're not in it for the long haul. They're going to go off and have another 2.5 kids. Right. So at the end of the day, we've got to change that perception, and we've got to challenge ourselves to go for it. Continue with your studies, continue and get your PEng. But some of it is self-inflicted, some of it is industry perceptions.
Well, and I would imagine too as well, and this is changing, so this is a good thing, but it's what's happening internally in our companies and in our industries. Are we making it easy for women to go and have children and have a life outside of the career and then come back? And to that point, the whole theme of today is gender parity.
Right.
Are we making it easy for men
Right.
to stay at home and have the 6 months or the year, because now it's 18 months, right?
Yeah, and it goes back to your original comment of what we grow up with and what's around our kitchen table.
Yes.
So if you see your dad at home preparing meals and helping out, then you might grow up differently.
And there's that beautiful, you're planting the seed of a different mindset. Yeah. And I think the mindset is such a big piece of this. Yeah. And that's why having these conversations at the corporate level when you're at the beginning of your career or further, that's good, but we've sort of missed the first 25 years, right? The first half of all of this. Yeah. So I think planting those seeds really early is a big deal. So I hope everybody makes their husband make dinner tonight. And I have to say, I don't cook, nor do I do the groceries. So I just do that for the women's movement. I don't do it for myself.
Thank you for taking it.
You're welcome out there.
Take one for the team.
That's right.
That's great.
Yeah.
Have you seen within companies, specific barriers that women are facing? And do you have any thoughts about how companies can help reduce those barriers?
Outside of, some of the regulated, I don't want to say quotas, but the regulated goals from a diversity perspective, if it's not encouraged, if it's not talked about a lot, it won't happen. And if you don't measure it, so there's the old saying, what gets measured gets done. So if you're not constantly challenging your leaders to make those hires and make those promotions and ensure that there is diversity at the table, it won't happen. So I think it's walking the talk and challenging the status quo and ensuring that if you see a gap, how are you going to fill that? That is the most that leaders can do in the field, just to make sure that you're not ignoring the fact that it's primarily male dominated. So
moving to a topic of mentorship, How important has this been to your careers, either as a mentee or a mentor? And do you currently have either a mentor or a mentee?
So I've had informal and formal mentorships. I joined an organization prior to Randstad 10 years ago, and there was not a senior leader in HR, so the president actually assigned a mentor to me, which was the best thing that he could do, because this individual knew the organization, they knew the culture, they knew the business really well. They weren't an HR person, but at the end of the day, they were able to help me to remove some of those barriers that exist and understand the unwritten rules and what it took to be successful in the organization. So we met on a monthly basis. We had specific goals and targets that we talked about, and we followed up on it. So the important thing about having the program is not just to have it for having its sake, but it's for the mentee to benefit from it. And if you don't do that, then it's just not worth having. So there are formal mentorship programs, but there's also informal mentorship programs where, you know, I like the way you manage your career. How did you do it? Can we meet? Can we have lunch? Can we have coffee? So it's encouraging those type of conversations to happen. And on the flip side of that, there's also sponsorship. So there is someone who takes an interest in your career. You know, I see that you have some potential. I'm going to help you with that. So it's really important to open the door to those programs. Yeah.
I have had a mentor, and I would probably say it was a little bit more on the informal side. It wasn't quite as structured, and what are the goals, and da-da-da. Yeah. It was somebody who I worked with for a number of years, and I think what was so powerful about what I learned from him was it was all of the stuff that you can't put on paper. It's all of the stuff that you can't put on your resume. It's all of those moments of, you know, how do I smooth out this, you know, this situation? How do I handle this moment? How do I handle this discrepancy? So it was all of these intangibles that when I look back to what I learned, not really knowing I was learning it, but knowing now that I pick up on those conversations and all of those things that were discussed, I'm so grateful for that. And I quite frankly, I haven't had a mentor like that since. I mean, part of the issue is, again, my industry is so small and it's so niche that it's difficult for me to cast my gaze to someone above because so few people are doing roles like I'm doing. I think the other thing that's a little bit different about my situation is I am independent. So I don't have the benefit of some of the structures of what happens internally, but I see, I mean, I see literally magic happen within organizations between mentors and mentees. And I think one gets just as much as the other side does.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
So it's just that person who kind of sits on your shoulder and asks those open-ended questions and says, you know, what do you think? And are you sure? And all of those things that we forget to ask ourselves.
Yes.
So I think that conversation is so important, and it's got to be a mix of male to female and female to male, and it's got to be the whole thing. And it's not just building confidence and building presence and not just that, it's building business acumen. It's building strategic acumen. I mean, do you know the numbers? Do you know where the business is going? So it's not just the other stuff. Yeah.
We provide programs for organizations to join. So we have our Wisdom Top 100 mentoring program, peer mentoring programs, but those are more for organizations to send 1 or 2 women to these programs so that they can learn from others. But how do you think organizations can help facilitate the mentoring within their organization? So whether they're either starting a program or they want to get something going, how do have you seen an organization do this successfully, or how have you seen this really happen well?
A lot of times it will happen organically. So prior to launching a formalized program, don't fool yourself. It's happening already. And people are ambitious enough to look at folks that they see as role models, and they will seek out the mentorship opportunities. So take advantage of the fact that it's already happening organically, but also ensure that from an engagement perspective and a career growth and career path perspective, you are allowing it to happen formally as well. And like Shoana said, it doesn't necessarily need to be documented with goals, but ensure that the conversations are happening, people understand how to maneuver in certain situations, knowing the numbers. I really loved what you said about understanding the strategic goals, understanding what makes the company run, work, make money.
Big picture.
It is so critical nowadays. So be a part of, the power huddles or your town hall meetings, and the leaders will always talk about the numbers. And don't just think that I'm not a finance person, so it doesn't matter. It matters because you want the organization to be successful. You want to benefit from that success. So ensuring that those discussions include numbers and includes measurements, and it includes some of those KPI discussions that is so critical, when you get to the upper levels.
And I think that's changing mindset too. I mean, millennials that are coming up behind us, fearless, smart, ambitious. I mean, just breaking down all the walls. So I think we're going to see. We are already seeing that this generation is really hungry to understand the big picture and to really get a sense of, okay, in the role that I play, where do I fit? And I think for that reason, a lot of this will start to change. And I think that this idea of mentorship as well, it's not just professional.
Right.
I mean, in some cases, my spouse has been my best coach. Right, has been the best person to call me out on some of the decisions I've made or about to make, right? So it's not just within the walls of your company, it's in the walls of your home and outside of that as well. And
finding a good peer group that you can actually talk open and honestly with.
And I think the honest conversation is a big, big piece of it because I think we have to have some uncomfortable conversations about what's happening or not happening with gender equality and diversity and all of those things that nobody really wants to have on their lips except for once a year, right? And you got to have some of those conversations to really push it forward.
Honest conversations. We rolled out a leadership program called Fierce Leadership, and it's all about having this transparent discussions. And if it comes from a place of, sounds corny, but love, but it comes from a good place, great intentions, it's okay to have that discussion because I want to see you successful. I want to help to make you better, and I want to enrich our relationships. So love it.
It's all for the same bottom line. I mean, if everyone is in alignment and everyone's working toward the same goal, then again, hopefully those walls will come down. You're all on the same team, hopefully. And that's what's so exciting about now seeing companies build their companies based on culture and based on values. I mean, that's what Zappos is doing. I mean, there's companies even within the GTA that are taking the Zappos, platform. And if you have people who all agree on the same set of values, then I mean that's half the battle.
And then you're encouraging them to make decisions because they understand that the company has its values, and if you're staying within that, then you can be empowered to make decisions.
Right, and it's values beyond what we always say, which is honesty and integrity and transparency and all of those things. Like I think it goes deeper, and that's what Zappos has done, which is really, I mean, I think one of their values is to create a little fun and a little weirdness. I mean, you don't see that on everyone's plaque as you walk in their door.
No.
Right? That's not kind of chiseled into the marble. But that's what's so exciting. And again, I think millennials are changing that. So yeah, I'm clearly a big fan of that.
Because there's less of a barrier of you stay at work these 8 hours and then you shut off and you go home for the rest. It's all now mixed. And you want your colleagues to also be part of your broader family, and that trust is built. And then it all benefits the company.
That's right. That's right.
And when you think about it, nobody shuts off. Right? So with smart technology and smartphones, you can have your emails, you stay connected. People are tweeting right now in my organization. So they feel a part of it. And if they do feel that we're all in one team, on one goal, one mission, they want to stay connected.
Right.
So you talk about the different generations. staying connected and being informed and understanding what is happening minute by minute is important.
Yeah.
And again, that's not the organization saying you must, it's them wanting to.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, Daniel Pink has written extensively about this, right? I mean, it's really not numbers and salary and
Right.
that's not what drives people.
No.
It's autonomy, it's passion, it's being a part of something bigger than you are.
Yeah.
And you know, I love his writing and the research that he pulls to reflect a lot of those, you know, key points that he makes.
Yeah, which is changing the way all organizations are being run. Which is
know.
so interesting.
So interesting and so exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So beyond the social or moral imperatives, what benefits do diversity-rich and inclusive workplaces have to customers, employees, other stakeholders?
We're a reflection of our customers, right? So, and the world out there. So if you look at Canada, it's a very diverse organization, country, I mean. At the end of the day, you want that reflected internally. So it only benefits everyone, not just your client, not just the employer, but the people within, to see that there is interesting mixes of ideas that comes to the table, and it's not just, you know, one platform that you're working from. So when you have, and again, I'm going beyond just women, men. I'm talking about, you know, different mixes of you know, sexual orientation, persons with disability, opening your doors to the fact that we've got mental illness in the workplace that we need to embrace and make people comfortable to know that it's a safe environment. So diversity comes in many forms that we need to embrace and reflect, not just within, but externally with our clients.
Yeah.
So it should be important. We want to partner with our organizations, other organizations, and they want to know that they're partnering with people that look and feel like them.
Right.
And that the things that are important to them is also important to us as well.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't say it any better, 100%. Who you are within the walls of your corporation has to reflect who you serve, 100%. And I think I think it's a little bit sad that we do need to put policies in place to make sure that these things happen, but I do think in 10, 20, 30 years, those won't be as necessary anymore because it will just be happening. It's almost like, you know, when I look at the kids that go to school with my children, I mean, my children are you know, Irish and French and East Indian. So my children are mixed. And they're going to school with so many other kids that are mixed. I mean, I would say the vast majority of children now are mixed. So that's not really an issue to them anymore. And I don't think they're going to say, oh, well, that little boy is this or that little girl is this. It's just kind of a non-issue for them. So I do think, as it does make me a little bit sad we do need to put these policies in place, it will become a non-issue in a couple of generations, or much sooner than that.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So I mentioned at the beginning that we have our Canada's Most Powerful Women Top 100 Awards that the nominations just launched today. One of the reasons why we put these awards, why we started these awards, was we wanted to inspire the next generation of women. How do you think that organizations can take that step to identify the top talent or the future leaders that are to come, and then how do they help develop them to make sure that they stay in the organization but can grow in the organization?
So again, expanding it outside of just women, I think all organizations need to look at the fact that the world of work is changing. And it's not just the technical skills that gets you to the top. You know, so you talk about EQ, IQ. We released a study on AQ, the agility quotient. So it's the ability to be nimble. It's the ability to understand what is changing in your social norms. It's being innovative. You talked a little bit about that. Being creative, being wacky, if that's one of your values. You know, understanding the world around you and encouraging that. So from a leadership perspective, I think diversity as a whole needs to be encouraged and needs to be talked about on a regular basis and ongoing, and from a talent management perspective. So it's ensuring that you're nurturing and growing and you're developing a diverse set of leaders. Because again, the reflection of who you are should be the reflection in the market, should be the reflection of your partners that you're servicing. So I think from a leadership perspective, wholesomely, we've got to take a look at that and make sure that it is a strategic priority for the organization. Companies often do surveys about engagement, and they're great indicators of how people feel from a trusting perspective of the organization that they want to grow in. So they'll give you feedback and they'll tell you what is missing and what is lacking. And fortunately, companies are scoring really well. You talk about, top 100s. There's a top 50 organizations to work for. And the reasons are based on what we're talking about. People feel comfortable, they feel welcomed, and they feel that it's diverse enough for them to grow their careers in.
Yeah. And I think the more we see and hear from senior management and from those at the executive level and have those open discussions, and the idea of no walls in the corporate space, I think is very interesting. But I think there needs to be mentally no walls in the corporate space. Right. There needs to be this really honest, open door policy of what's happening, what isn't happening, how can I help, how can I get in there, and that's sharing information. Because you see organizations that work by more of a matrix. They're seeing different results than more traditional hierarchical, right? Easier said than done, because when you're working with the vast number of people and the number of initiatives and the number of goals, and that's not easy, and especially if you're a business that's trying to be scalable. But that being said, I just think it's baby steps, right? It's all of these little things that we can do along the way that's just going to make it a little bit easier.
And also scalable, and to be able to compete on a global scale. Canada, we have this unbelievable workforce, and have these great cities to live in, and we need people who can then, compete for Canada. That we can have economic stability and grow, and part of that is our human capital. We have our resources, but we have our human capital. And so I think, as companies, we need to really focus on developing those younger people and all the future leaders so that Canada continues to prosper.
Absolutely.
So what do you think are some of the biggest challenges, or maybe just one of the biggest challenges you see for the next wave of business leaders?
I think it's having the dialogue and talking about it, and making it real within your organization, setting objectives towards making sure that you are going to be able to compete, that you are going to be able to be nimble to reflect the competitive environment as well as your clients' ever-changing needs. So it's being open to that, and if you're not open to that, then you're going to get left behind the 8 ball. So there's a lot of talk about innovation. And there's a lot of talk about, creativity and doing things differently. It's being at the forefront of that. Listen to what the market is saying and see where the trends are, so that you're able to be more competitive and stay in the game for a longer period of time.
A couple things come to mind when I hear that question. I think the first thing, and I feel like I'm bookending here, it's mindsets. And you got to change the mindset a lot faster than when people walk in your door. So I think the mindset is a big deal, and that's got to happen very, very early on. And that has a lot to do with how we're raising our not only our girls, but our boys. So clearly that's a bit of a soapbox that I'm on today. But that's something that I have a big, big belief in. And I think the other thing is it's fail often, right? It's try new things. And do things differently than you did before, and question and I guess that's all I can say is I just feel as though if we're always going down the same track, we're always sort of going to get the same result. So if we change things up and do things a little bit differently, then we may just get a different result. So those are the two things that come to mind for me.
Because it is International Women's Day,
Yep.
is there anything different that you would say to women? You know, what advice would you give to women who are starting out in their careers?
I like what Shoana just said about fail often. So research has shown that women have this fear of failure, so they won't strive and they won't go for it. But my message would be to go for it, learn from failure, embrace it, make sure you're in a safe environment to fail so that, you know, it's not going to hinder your growth and development.
Yeah.
But don't be afraid to take the chances that, you know, our male cohorts will do. There was a famous quote out there that said, a man will apply for a job when they have 50% of the skill set to do the job, and females will do that when they have like 110%.
Right.
But, you know, at the end of the day, just take a risk and take a chance and not being afraid to fail. I think that's a really cool message that I'd give.
Right,
Yeah.
right. You know, I would take it from the perspective of having been independent for the last handful of years, which is, I think, an exciting time. It's a different time. It's all about the idea that, sure, you got to start with a passion, but you can't end with passion. You got to know where you're really good, and you got to know where to pull in your other team members and your experts, right? I mean, one of the first things I did was I got a really good bookkeeper and I got a really good accountant, because I do need to push myself into the uncomfortable world of numbers and that type of thing, but that is not my unique ability, and that's not why I went independent. Mm-hmm. So I think when I see people who are saying, "Oh, it's all about passion," yeah. Okay, passion is gonna push you past midnight when you're working on a project, but you've got to be able to be very clear on what you're good at and what you're not good at, because you're just not going to be all things to all people. And in that case, you got to know how to bring in your team, and as we've heard a million times before, bring in people who are better than you and who make you look good.
Yeah.
So I kind of take it from the position of going independent and being independent. But that's something that I would say over and over and over again, is know what your passion is, but also know where
your limitations
are, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, you just got to know how to support those limitations and you know, get other people in to support you. Yeah.
The theme for International Women's Day this year is Pledge for Parity, in an effort to get both men and women involved in closing the gap of gender parity worldwide. What are your thoughts on what this involvement could look like?
I think it starts at the grassroots. Shoana talked about, you know, the kitchen table discussions and so forth. So it can start in the homes, starts in the community, within the school system, and build it up, and try not to stereotype or to put people in different, you know, buckets or silos. So if I'll go back to the STEM fields, encourage that from an early age. If your daughters are interested in taking apart trucks and putting it back together, allow that to happen, and allow it to happen organically. And it's when we put barriers at the beginning of their lives, that's where they're going to expect it. So it's just being open and encouraging diversity, and ensuring that it starts early in age, all the way into the workplace, and to continue to encourage that throughout the work world.
Well, I think if we can have on-site daycares where the men will come in and work for a couple hours. I'm just kidding. A little bit. I'm not kidding.
Really.
There's usually something behind that. I think I spoke at an event this morning, and International Women's Day, they invite men and women. So it's helping men and women both get on board with the idea of gender parity, and every man I know is up for that, right? So it's about including men in that conversation and getting a sense of what's their perspective on this whole thing, and what more do they think they can do to support women within their organizations to get to that level of, you know, the 50-50 split in our corporate offices. Yeah.
That's great. So we do have some questions from Periscope and Twitter.
Amazing.
Do you think women still feel pressure to be tougher than men in order to be successful in business?
Do you want to go first?
I'm going to take that from the perspective of some of the clients who I coach, and I do think, I say this with a kind heart, okay, so know that. I find that younger women feel as though they need to overcompensate. I don't see that as much with women who are potentially wiser in years, because I think we're living in this interesting time of the curse of knowledge. So we have an unbelievably well-educated employee base that we can draw from, and a talent base, but we're hanging our hats a little bit too much on that. So I do feel as though women are arming themselves a little bit more with that toughness. When if you there's something to be said for years on earth. There's wisdom that is grown through years on earth. So I think in our younger generations, I do see that a little bit more.
And with that wisdom, do you see people moving towards more of an authentic self?
Yeah,
or
getting a little bit more comfortable in your own skin, getting okay with what's happening and with what's not happening. One of the things that my mentor said, which I love and still think about and use, is if you like me, great. And if you don't, great. And it's harder to say that when you're younger in your years, and I think throughout the years it's a little bit easier. Now that's not to say that you can't work to be likable, but that means that that's not going to shape my identity or change my career or, quite frankly, even ruin my day, because I'm going to do my best. Right. But that's what I see in my work.
Okay, so I would agree with you, but challenge it a little bit, where I have personally seen where a woman is tougher or more aggressive. The B word is tossed around a lot. When a male has those attributes, they're seen as ambitious and hard driving. So it's not a negative connotation. And I do believe that organizations need to embrace the fact that you are going to have females, even younger females, that are a little bit more aggressive, and they are very much ambitious, and they're not what you would put in the box of how a female should behave. So while maturity and years on earth does play a role, where we're more confident, at the outset I do think it needs to be embraced more, and it needs to not be seen as a negative.
Right.
Yeah.
Or realize our unconscious bias when we see a young, ambitious woman. Maybe it's not her emulating a man, it just is her.
She's ambitious.
And she's ambitious. That's great. Okay, another question is, how do I ask someone to be my mentor?
You ask. People are so flattered when that question is posed of them. They're honored. They didn't think of it sometimes. So if there are people that you want to emulate their behaviors and you've seen them successful, just ask. And you'll see, like, the light bulb moment will go off, and they're thinking, oh my God, I can affect somebody's career. I can encourage them in a positive way. It is a very easy thing to do over coffee, lunch, hallway, by the water cooler. People are flattered. So again, if there isn't a program in your organization, feel comfortable to ask. It's a safe question. Yeah.
Sometimes the quickest route is, between 2 points is a straight line. So yes, just ask. Yeah.
So that's our last question from the audience. So I wanted to thank both of you for joining us today with the WXN Randstad discussion on International Women's Day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was fun.
Good.
Great.
Cheers.
It was funny.